In India, when you buy a new car, you pay several taxes. They are GST, goods and service taxes, road tax, registration tax, TCS, tax collected at source, insurance, GST. In India, the authority to drive a private car depends upon two factors: the maximum life cycle of your vehicle and the validity of your driving license. The car's lifespan up to 15 years. You can legally drive your personal car for first 15 years as long as you have valid registration certificate and a pollution under control PUC certificate. Beyond 15 years, under the vehicle scrappage policy, your car must pass a fitness test. If it passes, you get registration authority for 5 more years, up to 20 years total. And after 20 years, it must pass a fitness test every 5 years to remain on road. That means if your car have passed the fitness test after 15 years and after 20 years, it is deemed to be understood that it is good for the roads and it is not polluting the atmosphere. But even after passing the fitness test, you have to pay a lump sum green tax, often called as an environmental levy or pollution tax, valid for 5 years block. It means you are being penalized to use a fit car. A tax ranging from 2,000 to 7,000 rupees is to be paid to the government. The government has several factors to take the green tax. The number one is pollution control, the second one is phase out, incentive, fund allocation for state-of-the-art emission monitoring facilities, which nobody has ever seen it. And after all this, still we have the worst AQI and the constant rising temperature of cityscape. The authority fails to understand that pollution and the rising temperature is not just due to private car owners, but other reasons like residential household emissions, industrial and power plants, dust and construction, transportation, vehicular emission, biomass burning and crop residue. If we compare the carbon footprint of cement road versus vehicle, it comes out to be a different story. Cement production used for cement roads. The cement industry accounts for roughly 5 to 8% of global CO2 emissions. Every ton of cement produced releases roughly 0.8 to 1 ton of CO2 into the atmosphere. And if compared to a 15-year-old car, it is like this. An older, less fuel-efficient car driving in India might emit between 2.5 to 4 metric ton of CO2 over an entire year of heavy driving. In contrast, pouring just a few kilometers of cement road requires thousands of tons of concrete, resulting in emission equivalent to thousands of cars running for a year. Air quality and particulate matter, that is dust load, road and building construction activities contribute 10 to 30% of total particulate matter, PM10, PM2.5 in urban areas. The Indian context, studies by organizations like IIT Delhi found that heavy machinery and construction dust can account for upwards of 18% of wintertime PM2.5. This fugitive dust causes severe localized spikes in air pollution, significantly more immediate and dangerous to residents than the exhaust of aging cars. Urban heat island effect, heat retention. Cement roads are notorious for their high thermal mass. They absorb sunlight during the day and release it at night, drastically raising localized city temperatures and exacerbating the ground level ozone. Now let's compare these cement roads to asphalt roads. While black asphalt also retains heat, light-colored concrete reflects sunlight more effectively, higher albedo, which can somewhat offset the heating effect long-term. But the massive scale of deforestation, loss of tree canopies required to widen roads create permanent urban heat islands. Additional environmental factors: groundwater depletion. Concrete roads prevent rainwater from seeping into the earth, increasing urban flooding and straining local aquifers. Toxic runoff, rainwater washing over concrete picks up heavy metals and chemical additives which flow into drainage system. Loss of carbon sink. Clearing trees and vegetative cover for road expansion removes natural systems that absorb carbon dioxide. Now let's compare an average Indian versus an Indian politician in terms of polluting the earth. An average Indian emits about 2 tons to 2.2 tons of CO2 per year. To this, an Indian politician personal or household footprint is comparable to other high expenditure urban households. So here is the eye-opener. An average Indian with one car emits 170 to 190 tons over a 70 years lifetime, while Indian minister estimated at 500 tons or more over a lifespan. This dramatic difference is driven by air travel, motorcade fleet use, lifestyle spending. Let's compare the private jet flight taken by politicians and the rich and the famous versus the common man with his 15 years old car. So here it goes. A private jet flight from India to West produces significantly more emissions than an average person's petrol car drives in an year. A typical private international flight can easily emit between 3.5 to 5 tons of carbon dioxide per trip as compared to 2 to 3 tons of carbon dioxide per year by an average petrol car user in India. To add to this, private jets are up to 10 times more polluting than commercial airlines and 500 times more polluting than a personal daily life footprint. Still, the question doesn't go away. Why all the responsibility of pollution is being put on the shoulders of a common man while the rich and famous politicians, bureaucrats are enjoying and polluting 500 times the earth? This page shows that politicians during election years takes thousands of private planes, helicopters to the designated areas, which results to pollution and is restricted to chief minister, union ministers and the prime ministers while there are non-election years. Even after giving fitness test of your car and paying green tax, the government is not happy with you. They have intention to ruin your fit car by introducing E20 petrol variant which has 20% ethanol and 80% petrol. The reality is that it doesn't fix the problem in older cars. The reasons are below. Incomplete combustion older vehicles are calibrated for pure petrol or low blend ethanol E10. When forced to run on E20 without engine recalibration, the fuel burns poorly, which spikes nitrogen oxide emissions. Material corrosion. Older fuel systems rely on rubber and plastic components, hose, seals and gaskets that ethanol can dissolve and degrade. The deterioration causes fuel leaks and clogs injectors, drastically increasing emissions. Moisture attraction. Ethanol is highly hydrophilic. It absorbs water in older metal fuel tanks. This creates internal corrosion and causes phase separation where the fuel and the water separate, leading to rough idling and stalling. Drop in mileage. Ethanol contains less energy per unit than petrol, which can result in 5% to 8% drop in mileage because the car burns more fuel to cover the same distance. The overall environmental benefit is negated. Fully realize the emission reduction benefits of E20 fuel. Vehicles require modern fuel injection system, oxygen sensors and engine control unit ECU calibrated specifically for ethanol blends. Older cars do not have such technology. His page says that petrol has a significantly larger footprint than ethanol. This comparison is of 100% petrol versus 100% ethanol and not E20. And if the government decides to force E100, that means 100% ethanol run cars. The older cars have to be scrapped out. Obviously, the entire country has to replace their petrol run car with E100 cars, which is impossible. While this page is saying that ethanol is creating less carbon footprint, but I have something for you. Firstly, ethanol is less efficient than petrol. It is 65 to 70% of energy of a pure petrol. This means you have to burn a larger volume of ethanol to travel the exact same distance as you would do on petrol. Second, producing 1 liter of ethanol requires 3 to 5 liters of industrial processed water. However, the total water footprints, which includes the agriculture irrigation required to grow the crops like sugarcane, rice and maize, is estimated to be between 2,800 to 10,790 liters per liter of ethanol. That means so to produce 1 liter of ethanol, 10,000 liters of groundwater is needed when it is to be used for agriculture and for food. This page shows key ingredients required to produce ethanol. The first is sugarcane based and the second is grain based. The sugarcane based ethanol has 3 types of raw material. The first being sugarcane juice, B heavy molasses, C heavy molasses. Same with the grain based, starch based ethanol. First, maize, corn, broken rice sourced from open market or sulfurous from Food Corporation of India, FCI. That means the sulfurous food which was not distributed between the poor will be used to create ethanol. We never know the exact numbers and the discrepancy remains that are they being really given to the poor or redirected to produce ethanol. The third one is damaged food grains, wheat, rice that are rendered unfit for human consumption. There are many government grain storage which do not have roofs, and during rainy season all the grains get damaged. So the mistakes done by government babus or the system is being used or to say justified for generating ethanol. Fourth one is other grains, jawar, bajra, ragi and millet. And the fifth one is cellulose based second generation ethanol. So after going through all this information, we come to a conclusion that All the older cars with fitness test should be allowed to use pure petrol, while new cars should be manufactured keeping in mind E20, E100 and fuels for the future. Hope you find these findings to be resourceful. Please comment what do you think about E20 and E100 fuel variants.